Thank you very much. I'm here to talk about building sustainable tea parties with a lot of smart people. So just wanted to get those buzzwords out of the way as quickly as possible. But you've established a really nice environment here, and I appreciate it. This is my first time back in Quincy since the Tea Party in Washington Park on September 12, 2009. That was a fantastic weekend, not just here, but all across the country. I believe that at least 2.8 million people took part in tea parties somewhere that day. And it's really remarkable that here we are almost 3 years into this thing, when a bunch of people who were or were not into politics, or were to one degree or another, stopped listening to the organizations that we've been told all of our lives will take care of us, including our political lives, right? There's a party over here and there's a party over here. Choose one of them. They'll take good care of you. They'll tell you where to go. They'll tell you what to do. They'll tell you which candidates to support. They'll tell you everything you need to know about politics. They'll take care of your political life. And somewhere between the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the second or third stimulus, borrowing trillions of dollars from the future, talking about sustainability, how about financial sustainability? Borrowing trillions of dollars from future generations to spend today to deliver promises made years ago by people who aren't around to fulfill them. And we decided we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to listen to the organizations that are supposed to solve our political problems for us. We're going to take it to ourselves. And February 27th, 2009 was the first Tea Party in St. Louis. And we had 6 days to plan that. There were 40-so tea parties across the country that day. It was a day like this. There was flurries coming out of the sky. It was 30 degrees. It was a Friday. It was 11 o'clock. People had to work. We hoped for 50 people, and about 1,500 showed up. And it was absolutely remarkable. We didn't expect that. And the people who spoke that day I had never met before. And one of them was Hall of Fame tight end Jackie Smith, who was a hero of mine. And it's funny because I've been really lucky to get to come speak to groups like this, and had some writing published in newspapers and been on TV, and yet we've put 600 to 800 conservative candidates into office last year and last fall. We've changed the agenda in America, and yet I think the coolest accomplishment was getting to introduce a Hall of Fame tight end. That was my hero growing up. That was quite a moment. But we came together and we decided we were going to take this back. And I remember I got home that day and listening to Fox News, and Neil Cavuto was saying, yeah, a bunch of people got together, and probably more than they thought. But 6 weeks from now, nobody will ever hear of the Tea Party again. And I'm so glad he said that, because on the way home that day I was thinking, I basically had to take a week off work. I got no sleep. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We were making this stuff up as we went along. And we got down there, 1,500 people showed up. I was still, when you're out in the cold for a long time, you get home and you're in the house, you just don't get warm. No matter what you put on, how close you sit to the fire, you just don't warm up. It was like that. I wasn't in a great mood. I was kind of at a high from the event, but it was still, I was just exhausted. I wanted to go to bed, and then I heard Neil Cavuto say that, and about an hour later, I was on a talk radio show in another city, I believe in Tennessee, and the first caller asked, when is the next tea party going to be? And I said, I was thinking this would be the last one, and we just all went through a week of hell, but as soon as we can, as soon as we can. And that was April 15th. And the thing took off. And, you know, we did the rallies and we protested Obamacare and we worked really hard and we came together and we formed all kinds of organizations, and some of us split off into other organizations and some of us formed new organizations. But somehow or other, this big group of people has really only gotten bigger over the last 3 years. And I believe that now close to 30 million people have attended some sort of a Tea Party event since this whole thing started. And it hasn't even been 3 years. Hasn't even been 3 years. And what's so incredible about that is on the steps of the Arch that day, the first thing Jackie Smith said is, "I've never been interested in politics. I've never done anything like this before." He was fired up. He said, as a matter of fact, how many other people are doing something like this for the first time in their lives? Almost every hand went up. Almost every hand. Which means we've done something that the organizers of the parties don't want us to do, which is to think and act on our own. And we might work with them. At least one of the parties very often does really good things. But we can't surrender our thinking and our planning and our organizing to them. Because when it comes right down to it, it seems like once they get into a state capital or the nation's capital, there's an awful lot of seductions that sound a lot more interesting than doing the hard work of organizing ordinary people in meetings like this one, at rallies, at training sessions on how to knock on doors and talk to people. That is really hard work. Or I can just get really friendly with lobbyist A, who's going to make lobbyist B jealous, and then I'll have a whole lot of money to buy good advertising, to buy people to endorse me. And then rooms like this, the volume of our voices goes down and down and down, and eventually they can't hear us because we don't have the money to get their attention. And that's why we're not going away, at least not yet. So we had all those new people show up in St. Louis. All those people raised their hands. And about 2 years into this, we started looking around and thinking, you know what? We're seeing a lot of the same people. You know, the number of hands that went up when we asked, is this your first time, dwindled. There were fewer and fewer. Now, we were still vibrant. There were a lot of us, and we were getting a lot of great things done, but there were fewer and fewer of us who were new. And we realized that, you know, we don't quite have the numbers. So I started researching the numbers, and here's what I found. You probably knew this before I did, but it's pretty interesting and it's worth thinking of. There's a battleground poll of states that's conducted every 4 years, or every 2 years, is it? It's coordinated around elections, and it's done by a Democratic and a Republican pollster who work together to do this poll. They ask the exact same questions every time they give the poll, and I think the first year was 1982. It was during the Reagan administration. And I believe it's question D6 that asks you how to describe your ideology. And it's a scale from very conservative to very liberal. Very conservative, somewhat conservative, neutral, somewhat liberal, very liberal. In every poll since 1982, every 2 years that question's been asked, do you know what the answer is? Do you know how many people say somewhat or very conservative? 60%? 60. Between 59.6 and 61. It stays right in that range. Now, think about that. If 60% of Americans, voting Americans, describe themselves as somewhat or very conservative, why do we even have to spend money to win elections? Why doesn't it just happen? The reason is because I think there's a lot of people who really are conservative, but they don't realize that they believe what we believe. And so we started looking, and you know, anytime you say there's 3 kinds of people in the world, you've oversimplified it. But there's 3 kinds of people in the world. And from our perspective, from the way we look at it, They're the knowing believers. And the knowing believers are the people who, in 2009, when the Tea Party rally started, they said, thank God, there's somebody else who thinks like me. There's somebody else. And we gave each other the courage to go out. I remember the first couple of tea parties, people say, are you sure it's safe? Are they going to be taking pictures of our license plates? And I said, God, I hope so. I hope so. I hope we're that much of a threat to the system that they're going to be out there keeping track of who was there. But you know what? You're going to be surrounded by a bunch of people just like you, so don't be afraid. Come on out. And they weren't. April 15th in St. Louis, about 10,000 people showed up at Keener Plaza, and we were looking for about 3,000 or 4,000. Glenn Beck's microphone is very loud, but we came out, and those were the knowing believers. They knew they believed what we were saying. They just didn't know there were other people like them. And here we are. We found each other, and we've somehow managed to stay together. But that didn't get us there, right? That's the 30 million. That's the 30 million people who've been to tea parties, but you're scattered all over the country, and we're not enough to completely put it over the top. But we also know that the people who describe themselves as either very liberal or liberal is about 27%. So you put the 60% who are somewhat conservative, and we don't even have to worry about that 27%. We don't have to convert anyone. We can just start with the people who believe what we believe. And we've already gotten the people who believe what we believe and know it. Now we have to go get the people who believe what we believe but don't know it yet. There's a lot of them. There's more of them than there are of us. They believe what we believe and they just don't know it yet. So how do you do that? Well, here's what we learned about September 1st, 2009 in St. Louis. We were getting very upset. Dr. Gina Loudon, you might be familiar with her radio station. She also spoke here at the Tea Party in 2009. Dr. Loudon said she was furious at the way the left turned on John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. He is a libertarian on the left social edge of libertarianism. And he founded Whole Foods. And he provides all of his employees fantastic health care. And he puts a lot of responsibility for their own health on their shoulders. So they have a very high deductible. He helps pay some of the deductible in between, but when that money runs out that he gives them every year, they're on their own. So I'm on the exact same plan with my employer. And it's pretty cool because years that you just go through the entire year without getting sick, the kids don't really get sick. We have extra money to carry over to the next year. You get to the point where you could actually, go years without it. And then this year was kind of tough, and we ran out, and I had to fill in the gap until the deductible kicks in. But the thing is, it costs my employer very little. It costs me very little every month. And it works for Whole Foods, and his employees absolutely love it. And the people who wanted socialized medicine said, that's not good enough, Mr. Mackey. You're going to have to play our game. And he said, no, I don't want to play your game. My employees are healthier than you are. They eat better, they exercise, they live healthier lives. And part of the reason they do that is because we put the responsibility on them to manage the money for their own health. And we have provisions to take care of them, to help them if something goes terribly, terribly wrong. He's not being insensitive or careless. It's his money. And he's being very careful with his employees, and he's giving them the incentive to stay healthy. Who wants to have a fight over who's going to pay the medical bills when we get sick? It's easy. It's much better to stay healthy, and that system helps. It absolutely does. So Dr. Gina Loudon said, what are we going to do about this? And she came up with an idea. She said, why don't we get all of these tea partiers, most of whom have never gone to Whole Foods, because a lot of them think it's kind of weird and expensive, and it is. Why don't we go down there and shop? Why don't we just have a boycott instead of a boycott? Why don't we do something positive and show up and say we're going to spend our money? And not only are we going to spend our money, we're going to keep track. Because anybody who shows up there with the Tea Party movement, we're going to ask you to come by and let us scan your receipt. And we're going to add all those up, and we're going to tell Mr. Mackey, and he can use it any way he wants in his PR, how much money we brought into the store that night. We spent $50,000 in that store that night. 1,000 people shopped for the first time at a Whole Foods. Many of them became repeat customers. They absolutely loved it. We had people from as far away as Schaumburg, Illinois, come down to participate because they thought it was such a great idea. 70% of the people who walked through the door had never been to a Tea Party event in their life. And I didn't even think of that until they started mentioning it. And then we started asking, why? Why did you come to this? And they said, well, you know, on TV, guys look like a bunch of kooks. You know, you've got people in tri-cornered hats, and somebody that's 25 years old and went through certain public school systems don't know what a tri-cornered hat is. They thought it was a medical device. And you've got tri-cornered hats and people who speak in weird, stilted 18th century language, and they were being honest. And we hear, you know, some of the signs, and it seems like a lot of people shouting and yelling and angry. And the message, the policy things you talk about are great, but it just comes across as weird, and this felt safe. This felt very safe. We could approach. And here the people that we've met are not the kooks that we see on TV. And that set us to thinking about a year ago. One of our members of our board of directors, Ben Evans, is here with me tonight. We started thinking, we've got to do something about this. We've got to lower the threshold to approach us in the context of being Tea Partiers. Because they're not afraid of us at work. They're afraid of us when we're in a park. And that's okay. It's not their job not to be afraid of things that scare them. And I can be pretty frightening, you know. Some of my college buddies and I think, are the reason they want to keep people out of the wilderness. Protect the poor animals. But so we wanted to lower the bar for approaching us, and we developed what we call the after party. It's not a big rally, it's not big events, they're not very sexy. There's no stars born out of these things. They're for the people who never get on TV, never get on radio, never get an op-ed in a big national newspaper. But it's for more than that. It's to get together and have fun and be able to draw other people in because we've lowered the threshold. And I have a hard time with big, long meetings with long agendas and a lot of points to cover and a lot of decisions to be made. I have a very short attention span. and I think a lot of people do. So we said, let's make it a party. Let's make it a 45-minute meeting and a 2 or 3 hour get-together so that people can hang out. And if you want to bring some friends of yours, they're really just hanging out at a social networking gathering. It's a much lower bar to achieve. The meeting is also very short. We talk about what the last month's assignment is. We talk about the next month's assignment. And we usually have a speaker that can help them accomplish the next month's assignment. And those monthly assignments are pretty simple. Month 1 was write down 5 people that you're going to get closer to over the next year. You don't have to bring them in yet. You don't have to commit them to anything. You don't have to give us the names. But in order to get your next button, because we have a button for every month, you have to come in and tell us, yes, I wrote down 5 names. If I couldn't get 5, it's 3 is okay. But I actually took the time to decide who am I going to get closer to in the context of making our republic and freedom and liberty a little bit more sustainable over the next year. That was step 1. Step 2 is get those people together. That's it. This is a 2-hour assignment for the month. It's very easy. There's 12 months in the program. We don't know what the last 6 months are going to be because my attention deficit ended at the 6th month, But we're working on it. But we also think that by that time, the people who are driving this engine will be able to guide us and tell us what we need to do those last 6 months. So December is going to be the first time we're asking people to invite some or all of their 5 friends to the Tea Party event. And because of that, because it's their first time in, we're not actually going to have a meeting. It's just going to be a Christmas party. And it's going to be a very low threshold. It's to get to know people like you and me. It's to bring in the unknowing believers so that they can finally realize that there's other people just like them and they just didn't know it. And those people are the people who've been populating these events, these parties, these meetings, these marches, these rallies, these protests, and all the things that we've been doing for the past 3 years. Are people just like them, and hopefully by November of 2012, we're going to have reached all of those 60% who are somewhat or very conservative. Now, that's ambitious, yes, but think about the math. If each of you went out and brought in 5 people, okay, at some point, and I'm not sure because I told you we haven't gone out to this. I think somewhere along the line, we're going to ask that ring of 5 people to start another ring of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, right? Somewhere between Election Day, we're going to grow a little bit more. And we're going to keep growing and keep growing right up until then. We're going to arm them with information that they need for doing electoral, get out the vote, win your approval for your candidate or your cause. We're going to give them that training too over the course of this, but they will do it together. Remember, what we're doing is at the first meeting we had 120 people. 70% of them, again, it was their first Tea Party event. It's really amazing how when you lower the threshold and make it less threatening, you get 70% new people. But 70% of the 120 had never been there before. And they've got 5 friends now that they've tied in, 3 to 5 friends. That's a pretty significant number. And by the time we get to Election Day, we're going to have trained them, armed them, and more importantly, created 120, and then 500 and somebody do the math. my attention span was really bad in math class. So we're going to have a new generation of leaders. Not just I go to the rallies. They've formed their own organizations. They've done their own training. We're not doing elaborate training. The assignment every month is going to be to go out and do the next thing. But more importantly, they're going to be repairing the fabric of society. As we've given over the years, our thinking and our planning and our work to government, someone else to take care of this stuff for us, guess what? We've lost the connection to each other. We don't know our neighbors as well. We don't know the people on the other side of town as well. It's harder to think of who to call. What if I have to get 10 people together for something? Well, not anymore. Since this started, even after 2.5 years of being in the Tea Party movement, it's a heck of a lot easier for me now to know who to go to. And not just who to go to, but who has certain skills and who's good at certain things and who's in a certain trade that we can use. We've become a tighter group. Even as a very large group, we've become tighter because we've gotten to know each other a little bit better and we've gotten to rely on each other. And we've distributed the work across a larger area. And that's extremely important because once you've got the people, the knowing believers and the unknowing believers, once you've gotten them together, they want something to do. And ultimately, we're doing one thing. We're doing the same thing that we were doing on February 27th, 2009, and every one of these events that we've marched through since then. We're looking forward to the day that the tide of socialism, the threat of a tyrannical government, of someone else telling you where to live, how much you can sell your house for, what kind of roof you have on your house, who's going to pick up your stove, who's going to replace it, what color it's going to be, and where you're going to live. We're going to not only stop that from advancing, we're going to begin, even if it's slowly, almost imperceptible at first, we're going to start rolling it back so that we can make our own decisions, live our own lives, and help each other instead of relying on faceless bureaucrats to come in and live our lives for us. If you go to stlouisteaparty.com, it's stlouisteaparty.com, up at the top is a link that says the after party. If you go there, there's an after party guide. Everything that I said and more is in that after party guide. It's about 18 pages, I think. It's the numbers about the knowing and unknowing believers, all of that stuff, how we're getting started and where we're going. I hope you will download it, look at it, and see if it works for your organization. I think it will. And I think that if you try this, if you try lowering the bar to bring more people in, lowering the threat, you too are going to be part of that 60% who vote the right way for once. Thank you.